Most men think attraction begins with touch. It doesn't. For a mature woman, the first thing she wants you to touch is often something you cannot hold in your hands, her sense of being understood. And if you miss that, the most confident physical move in the world can feel completely empty. A mature woman has usually lived long enough to recognize the difference between attention and intention. She has been complimented before. She has watched men rush toward physical closeness while barely noticing what was happening inside her. That is why a man who slows down, pays attention, and creates emotional safety can stand out. This does not mean every mature woman wants the same thing. There is no secret button, no universal technique, and no gesture that guarantees attraction. People are individuals. But there is a pattern worth understanding. As people become more experienced, many become less impressed by performance and more sensitive to presence. So, what does it mean to touch her first? Touch her attention, not with your hands, with the way you listen. When she tells you something, don't immediately turn it into a story about yourself. When she pauses, don't rush to fill the silence. When she gives you a small detail about her life, remember it. When she expresses an opinion, don't treat disagreement like a challenge you have to win. Because a woman who has matured emotionally may not be looking for the loudest man in the room. She may be looking for the man who can actually see the person behind the words. Imagine she says, "I've had a difficult week." The immature response is to jump straight into fixing mode, giving advice she never asked for, or turning the conversation toward your own problems. A stronger response might simply be, "That sounds exhausting. Do you want me to listen, or do you want help figuring it out?" That one question communicates something powerful. I'm not here to control your experience. I'm here to understand it. And that is where real connection begins. Confidence is not pressure. Confidence is the ability to move forward while still respecting the other person's comfort. If the moment becomes physically affectionate, don't assume silence means yes. Don't interpret nervousness as an invitation. Don't treat hesitation as a challenge you have to overcome. Pay attention to clear, mutual signals. And when you are unsure, ask. That is not weakness. That is emotional intelligence. A mature woman can often recognize when a man is trying to get something from her versus when he genuinely enjoys being with her. She can feel the difference between someone performing confidence and someone who is actually secure. The secure man does not need to prove that he can get her. He wants to discover whether they genuinely fit. That shift changes everything. Instead of asking yourself, "How do I make her attracted to me?" ask, "What happens when we are together? Does she feel comfortable being herself? Do I feel comfortable being myself? Is there curiosity, respect, laughter, and reciprocity?" Those questions protect you from chasing an illusion. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes attraction grows when you stop trying to force it. You become present instead of strategic, curious instead of calculating, and direct instead of manipulative. You notice her words, her boundaries, her energy, and her choices. You give her room to come toward you voluntarily. That is what makes physical affection meaningful when it eventually happens. It is not a trick. It is not a shortcut. It is the natural extension of trust, chemistry, and mutual desire. So if you are a man who has been wondering why certain interactions feel flat despite doing everything you think you are supposed to do, look beyond technique. Maybe the missing piece was never the perfect touch. Maybe it was the feeling that came before it, the feeling of being noticed, the feeling of being respected, the feeling that she does not have to perform to keep your interest. When you create that connection without pretending, you become more memorable than the man who simply knows how to make an entrance. Because mature attraction is rarely about taking. It is about discovering. And the man who understands that stops chasing moments and starts building experiences that both people genuinely want to remember. Now consider something many men overlook. Emotional attention is not just about listening to her words. It is about noticing what she does not say. A mature woman may not always announce what she needs. She may reveal it through the way she responds, the subjects she returns to, the things that make her laugh, or the moments when she suddenly becomes quiet. But be careful. Reading someone does not mean pretending you can read their mind. It means staying curious. There is a huge difference between saying, "I know exactly what you're thinking," and saying, "You seem a little quieter than usual. Is everything okay?" One assumes, the other invites. An invitation is powerful because it gives the other person freedom. This is where many men accidentally sabotage attraction. They become so focused on appearing confident that they stop being responsive. They think confidence means having every answer, making every decision, and never showing uncertainty. But real confidence can sound like, "I'm not sure. What do you think?" It can look like listening without preparing your next sentence. It can mean changing your approach because you notice that something is uncomfortable. That kind of confidence is difficult to fake, and mature women often appreciate what cannot easily be faked: consistency, respect, emotional steadiness. If you are warm one day and distant the next because you are trying to create mystery, she may not experience that as attraction. She may experience it as inconsistency. If you intentionally make her jealous to get attention, you may create tension, but tension is not the same thing as trust. If you disappear simply to make her wonder where you are, you may create uncertainty, but uncertainty is not the same thing as intimacy. There is nothing wrong with having your own life. In fact, independence is healthy. But independence and emotional games are not the same thing. A mature man can be busy without pretending to be unavailable. He can have boundaries without punishing someone. He can show interest without becoming desperate. And he can experience rejection without losing his dignity. That last one matters more than most men realize, because how you handle a no reveals more about your character than how you behave when you hear yes. If she does not want physical affection, respect it. If she needs space, give it. If she tells you she is not interested, believe her. If the connection is not mutual, walk away without resentment. There is tremendous strength in being able to say, "I wanted this to work, but I respect your decision." That is emotional maturity. And ironically, the less you need to control the outcome, the more authentic your presence becomes. Think about the difference between two men. The first enters a date with a mission. He has memorized techniques. He watches every gesture. He analyzes every smile. He is constantly wondering whether he is winning. The second enters with curiosity. He wants to know who she really is. He shares his own thoughts honestly. He pays attention to how they communicate. He is attracted to her, but he is also evaluating whether the relationship is healthy for him. Which man is more relaxed? The second. Which man is more likely to create genuine connection? Usually the second. Because attraction becomes complicated when you treat another human being like a puzzle you have to solve. She is not a puzzle. She is a person. And you are not auditioning for approval. You are two adults discovering whether your lives, values, personalities, and desires can actually work together. That mindset can completely change the energy between you. You stop searching for hidden signs and start responding to clear communication. You stop obsessing over whether she likes you and start noticing whether you genuinely like the way you feel around her. You stop asking, "How do I make her chase me?" and start asking, "Do we bring out something healthy in each other?" That is a much more powerful question, because mature love is not built on constant uncertainty. It is built through repeated evidence. She says she will call, and she calls. You say you will show up, and you show up. She tells you something matters to her, and you remember. You make a mistake, and instead of defending your ego, you take responsibility. Those small moments become emotional fingerprints. They tell someone, "I can trust what I see." And when trust develops, closeness becomes less complicated. You do not have to manufacture every moment. You do not have to perform masculinity. You simply become present. That is what many men misunderstand about mature attraction. The goal is not to become irresistible to every woman. The goal is to become emotionally grounded enough that the right woman can recognize you without you having to manipulate her into staying. There is another layer to this that deserves your attention. A mature woman may care deeply about how a man makes her feel about herself. Not because she needs constant validation, but because experience teaches people what certain relationships cost. After years of relationships, friendships, careers, family responsibilities, successes, disappointments, and personal growth, many people become protective of their peace. That means your presence matters. When she spends time with you, does she feel judged? Does she feel rushed? Does she feel like she has to compete for your attention? Does every disagreement become an argument? Or does she feel that she can breathe? This is where your behavior outside romantic moments becomes more important than any clever line you could ever use. Watch how you treat people who cannot give you anything. Watch how you speak about people who are not in the room. Watch how you behave when plans change. Watch how you react when someone disagrees with you. Watch what happens to your personality when you are frustrated. Those moments reveal your emotional structure, and a mature woman may notice them even when she says nothing. You might think she is evaluating your clothes, your income, your appearance, or your confidence. She may be watching something much simpler. Can this man regulate himself? Can he communicate? Can he respect a boundary? Can he apologize? Can he laugh at himself? Can he disagree without becoming cruel? Can he show affection without demanding something in return? Those qualities create security. And security does not mean boring. That is another misconception. A relationship can have chemistry, humor, mystery, adventure, and excitement while still being emotionally safe. In fact, safety can allow people to become more expressive because they are not constantly defending themselves. When you know someone respects your boundaries, you can relax. When you know someone listens, you can open up. When you know someone will not punish honesty, you can tell the truth. That is the deeper form of intimacy, and it begins long before physical contact. It begins with attention, it begins with respect, it begins with emotional curiosity. So if you want to understand what mature attraction looks like, stop studying isolated gestures as if they are secret codes. Look for patterns. Does she voluntarily continue conversations? Does she ask questions about your life? Does she remember details? Does she initiate contact sometimes? Does she seem comfortable around you? Does she communicate her preferences? Does she make space for you in her life? These signs do not guarantee romantic attraction, but together, they can tell you whether there is mutual engagement. And if you are receiving mixed signals, do not build an entire fantasy around one smile, one glance, or one moment of closeness. Ask, communicate, clarify. That might sound less exciting than decoding mysterious behavior, but it is infinitely healthier. Because your goal should not be to become an expert at guessing women. Your goal should be to become an expert at communicating with people. That skill will serve you everywhere. There is also something you need to understand about your own behavior. If you constantly seek validation from women, every interaction becomes emotionally expensive. A compliment feels like proof that you matter. A delayed response feels like rejection. A date that goes badly feels like evidence that you are not enough. That is a dangerous place to live. Your self-worth cannot depend on someone else's attraction. You need a life that exists before romance and continues without it. Your friendships, your work, your health, your interests, your goals, your principles, your ability to spend a quiet evening without desperately needing someone to tell you that you are valuable. That is not about becoming emotionally detached. It is about becoming emotionally complete. Then when you meet a woman you genuinely like, you can appreciate her without making her responsible for your identity. You can say, I want you, without communicating, I need you to prove that I am worthy. There is enormous freedom in that distinction, and it changes how you approach physical affection too. Instead of asking, what should I touch first? You begin asking, what does this moment actually communicate? Maybe the right move is a smile. Maybe it is a sincere compliment. Maybe it is sitting closer. Maybe it is asking whether she is comfortable. Maybe it is simply letting the conversation continue. There is no universal sequence, there is only mutuality. When both people are participating, attraction feels less like a performance and more like a conversation. One person moves slightly closer. The other responds. One expresses interest. The other reciprocates. One asks. The other answers. That is the rhythm you should learn, not control, not pressure, not manipulation, reciprocity. Because the strongest connection is not the one where you somehow convince someone to give you attention. It is the one where two people freely choose to keep giving it to each other. And now I want you to remember one final idea, because it can change the way you approach every relationship from this point forward. Do not become obsessed with finding the thing that a mature woman wants touched first. Become the man who understands what deserves to be protected first. Her comfort, her dignity, her autonomy, and your own. That is the foundation. If attraction is present, it will not need to be forced. If affection is mutual, you will not need to manipulate it. If the connection is healthy, you will not have to constantly wonder whether you are being played. And if someone does not want what you want, your job is not to convince them. Your job is to accept reality and maintain your self-respect. That is what emotional strength looks like. A lot of dating advice teaches men to focus outward. How do I make her chase? How do I make her jealous? How do I make her miss me? How do I make her emotionally dependent? But those questions can keep you trapped in a never-ending game. A better question is this: who am I becoming through the way I date? Am I becoming more honest, more patient, more confident, more emotionally intelligent, more capable of communicating, more capable of hearing difficult truths, more capable of walking away from something unhealthy? Those are the questions that create a better man. And when you become that man, you no longer need a collection of tricks. You can be direct. You can tell a woman you are attracted to her. You can invite her on a date. You can express affection. You can ask for consent. You can accept her answer. You can laugh when something awkward happens. You can admit when you are nervous. You can say, I like spending time with you. You can say, I would like to see you again. There is something incredibly attractive about a man who does not hide behind games, not because every woman will want him, but because he does not need every woman to want him. He knows who he is, and that is the real lesson. The strongest man in the room is not necessarily the man who knows exactly what to say. Sometimes it is the man who can sit quietly and actually listen. Sometimes it is the man who notices discomfort and backs off without being offended. Sometimes it is the man who can say, I was wrong. Sometimes it is the man who can hear no and respond with respect. Sometimes it is the man who walks away from a relationship that repeatedly destroys his peace, even though his emotions are begging him to stay. That kind of strength does not make headlines, but it changes lives. And when you meet a mature woman who has developed her own standards, she may recognize it. Not because you performed some perfect technique, not because you discovered a secret physical shortcut, but because your behavior tells a consistent story. You are safe without being passive, confident without being controlling, interested without being desperate, affectionate without being entitled, independent without being emotionally unavailable, strong without needing to dominate. That balance is rare, and rarity is not something you manufacture. It is something you develop. So the next time you are with a woman you genuinely like, forget the pressure to create a perfect moment. Look at her. Listen to her. Pay attention. Notice whether she is comfortable. Notice whether she is engaging. Notice whether she is moving towards you voluntarily. And if you want to take things further, communicate clearly instead of guessing. Because the most meaningful kind of attraction is not built from uncertainty. It is built from two people knowing they are free to say yes, free to say no, and still able to respect each other afterward. That is where real confidence lives. And that is where mature connection begins. So I want you to answer something honestly in the comments. What matters more to you now when building a relationship? Being physically attractive, or making the other person feel genuinely understood and respected? Write your answer below, because your answer says something about the kind of man you are becoming. And if this message made you rethink the way you approach women, give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel for more psychology, relationships, confidence, and emotional intelligence content. And share this with one friend who needs to hear that attraction is not about tricks, pressure, or pretending to be someone you are not. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can touch first is not her body at all. It is the quality of the moment you create together.